thank you for joining us this evening. And why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of take it from there.
Oh, sure. I'm a registered nurse, and I live in Nova Scotia, Canada. So for everybody in the States that doesn't know where Nova Scotia is, it's on the east coast of Canada. It would be above Maine, kind of further out in the water. There's a show called Oak Island, and that is where Oak Island is. It's about an hour and a half away from me. So. And
very cool. I know Canada is like really pretty country, but I've been seeing a lot of the pictures. Alyssa, have you seen those pictures that are coming up with they have like feet of snow all over the place, and we are like sharing our sunshine in like 60-degree weather. So I don't envy the snow, but it looks very beautiful in pictures for sure.
Yeah, it's been actually, we're having a cold snap here today. So I was thinking about you guys. It's minus 26 Celsius with the wind chill. So I think that works out to be 17 in Fahrenheit. Yeah.
Close to that. That's, oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's cold.
I personally am cold if it gets like under 80 degrees. So yeah, we're in like sweatshirt and beanie cap here. And I think it's maybe like 40 or 50 something outside right now.
Yeah.
Fahrenheit.
Yeah, that's t-shirt weather.
Very cool. So we're here to talk about horses. Of course, this is the Reinforce the Horse podcast. So Alyssa, why don't you take it away and ask the next question? See how we go with that.
Alrighty. So what is your earliest memory that you have with
horses? I was probably about 13 years old, 14 years old. Well, actually, maybe 12 or 13. And my dad had bought these two ponies, Sally and King, and they were both black little ponies. And we used to ride them. And my dad was very much a just make it work kind of thing. So you just got on the horse and went. There was no instructions given. We didn't have saddles. I think there was a bridle. I'm not really sure. So my earliest memory is being on Sally and one end of the field bareback, and King, my friend was on King and he was at the other end of the field, and Sally decided she was going to King. And, I ended up coming off as she, got really close to King, and I had the wind knocked out of me. And so I just remember very vividly laying on my back, looking at the blue sky with the clouds. And, that, I don't know if you've ever had the wind knocked out of you. It's a really unpleasant feeling.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my first memory. Yeah.
Very cool. So, bareback and bridleless, aka a naked ride.
Well, I'm sure there was a halter on or some sort. Like he wouldn't just let us, something. But something like something. Yeah. But there wasn't.
So, do you think, like now looking back on that, do you think that was like totally insane, or do you ride bareback these days, or what is your preferred method?
So would I do that again as a 13-year-old? Probably not. And Dad did get me to ride again. So we did do some rides after that, but I rode King, and, we would go like for long rides up through the hills. And I'm sure it was just a bridle and then just bareback, and Dad was bareback as well. I have ridden my mare Annie bareback, and I enjoy riding her bareback. I don't go out cross country on her bareback, and I wear a helmet now. We didn't have helmets back then, or protective vests.
Yeah, helmets are really important. And I think a lot of people, Alyssa here keeps me on track and reminds me to wear the helmet. 'Cause I'm like, I don't need a helmet a lot of times, but I prefer bareback riding just because, I don't know, I just feel like it feels better and I can feel the horse a little bit more. But interesting. Definitely can see where, if you have to bail, you're going to bail pretty quick.
Yeah.
Bareback as opposed to in the saddle.
Yeah.
So you started as a kid, with your, riding as a young teen. What ultimately, or how did you get to the point you are now? in your horsemanship journey, and then ultimately with Dragonfly Meadows?
Well, after I had my accident there with Stallion King, I really didn't ride that too much. My dad got into standard bred racing after that, and his horses were very hot. It wasn't safe for you to go into the stall with them. He was very much an old school horseman. The horse had to do what he wanted, whether he communicated that in a clear and concise way is up for debate. But he would work his horses 6 days a week through the apple orchards and through the fields, and they would go to the races. And I would feed them and stuff, but I was scared of them because they were so big and just hyper. And so I was really scared of them. And I got away from horses for a really long time. And when I moved out to Alberta, because I grew up here in Nova Scotia, I moved out to Alberta. But I spent the majority of my life in Alberta. I would go on some trail rides, and I had some boyfriends at the time that had horses, and so we'd go riding with them. But I really didn't connect with them at that time. And I would do lots of hiking in the mountains of Alberta, and I would come across wild horses once in a while. And it was nice to see them, and they were there, and it was a really amazing experience, but I didn't connect with it. And I really honestly didn't get into horses until my 40th birthday when I got my first horse of my own. And his name was Willie. He was a big paint. He was 15'2", and he was green. And obviously I was green. And he was the beginning of the story. Like, that's where everything started.
Yeah, so tell us more about that. Like, so what ultimately led you to Willie? And was it kind of love at first sight sort of thing, or was it happenstance, or how did you ultimately get introduced to him?
That's a really great question. I have moved from Calgary to a more rural area, so I had bought 10 acres of land, and I kind of felt I needed something. It was very Western there, lots of ranches and farms and things. And I don't know, I was checking out the internet one day, and a friend of mine had horses, and I would go down to her place and spend some time with her and her horses. And I just saw this ad for Willie, and he was just up the road. And I had a friend of mine come and look at him, and I looked at him a couple times, and he was really quiet and big. And she had started him out with some Pirelli training in the beginning. And I just was kind of felt this connection with him. And so I took him to a boarding facility, I guess, close to where I worked. And that was kind of the beginning. So from there, I took some lessons, on Willie, and then I realized Willie needed further training. Like, I remember unloading the trailer, at the boarding facility, and a friend of mine said, you aren't the first and you won't be the last. And she meant I'm green and he's green is what she meant. Right. And yeah. I've never forgotten her saying that. And like I said, I really realized that I needed to learn more with horses. So I ended up taking riding lessons, at a trainer's place. And my lesson horse was Annie, who's my saddle horse now. And so Willie subsequently went down there for saddle training as well. And I really, really, enjoyed him. He taught me a lot. I remember trying to pick his feet up, spending hours trying to pick his feet up, and he just would not let me pick his feet up. And, all those things the horses do, and they wouldn't get on the trailer. So he's a kid's horse now, still in Alberta. So he retired out as a kid's horse, and, he's
very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And so from there, I learned from Willie is I needed to learn more. So like I said, I ended up taking the riding lessons, and then I rode Annie twice a week, and then Annie came for sale, and I just had to have Annie. And I wasn't sure if she was supposed to be my horse or not, but there was a series of events that you need to have this horse. So, that was how I got into the horses really, and ended up with the two.
Very cool. Yeah. And we've definitely heard, the horse picks the person. And
that's what's happened with both of us. So many other people.
Yeah. So expand on that a little bit, Alyssa.
All right. I guess Mocha was my first horse, and she was at the time a 10-year-old quarter horse mare, and she just, I I saw her for the first time knowing absolutely nothing. I didn't differentiate the difference between a halter and a bridle. I didn't know any breeds or, I didn't know. And she just kind of looked at me in a way. I mean, Mocha was very highly well-trained and broke. And she would do pretty much anything on cue, but she just kind of looked at me and was like, hey, I kind of like you. I was like, okay, cool. And it wasn't until my dad decided to purchase her that it was like, I think she was legitimately communicating to him by her because her eyes were so soft in the trailer, and my dad was just like, well, I gotta have this horse.
Yeah.
I just gotta care.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about Annie too. And she was really out of my budget. And what happened was, do you guys know who Anna Twinney is?
No.
Okay, she's a horse whisperer type person in the States. So what happened was Annie had come for sale and her sister Dee Dee had come for sale, and there's a guy coming to look at both of them, and he was going to pick one of them, right? And Annie was the horse I've been riding for a year, twice a week for lessons, and had done like trail rides with her, cattle drives with her, and I just really, really liked her. And so I told John I was really interested in Annie, and he was going to let me know. So what happened was I was listening to a podcast, Anna Twinney podcast on the Wednesday night. And then I went to work on Thursday morning, and my friend Anna was the charge nurse. And then my friend Annie, who worked in the emergency room, came upstairs to the ICU where I was working to tell me about something. And then there was another Annie. I think my patient's middle name was Anne that day.
Wow.
Yeah. And so
then that's like the entire universe.
I know. So the entire universe is tapping me on the shoulder, right? And so anyway, I checked my email that morning to see what, like after Annie came up from the emergency department, I checked my email, and John sent me a note and said that he was going to take Dee Dee and that Annie was mine if I still wanted her. So, and he let me make payments on her. So that was really, yeah. So she's meant to be mine. And we had some really great rides in the Rockies, and I used to compete a little bit with her on the Cowboy Challenge. And she's just a horse that takes care of you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've found that's a really interesting concept. Like, I found personally, like, the horses, they are so in such a short period of time. So, like, we've only been in and around horses for a few years now, and they've revolutionized my life. In so many ways, emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, all the LY words, right? Yeah. And of course, this is kind of like the story series that we are trying to put together on the show. So, part of my story is, just kind of working through past issues and trauma, like going way back in life. And then even in my adult life, there's some, I'm a military veteran, so there's some stuff there. Divorced in 2014, there's some stuff there. And largely, like, the horses have been so instrumental to to my ability to process and work through a lot of things at a personal level, very deep. And so, which that brings me to the question of, like, okay, so you're working with nurses, so you're a nurse by education and training and profession. And so tell us a little bit about how you wound up with that sort of aha moment, connecting the dots between you as a nurse and understanding that there are a lot of nurses, and I know this, I'm not even a nurse, but there are a lot of nurses who like you mentioned, are burned out, having a lot of issues, especially, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say even before COVID kicked off, the profession in and of itself had a lot of that going on. And then with COVID, it's like, oh my goodness. So you have, probably the world's at your disposal when it comes to working with nurses and wanting to get some R&R. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So, so I'd have Annie, Willie at home, and I would come home from a really stressful emergency shift, and I would go to the house and change, and they'd be standing at the gate, and then I would come to see them, and they would scatter because I was still stewing about something that happened at work. Right? It was a 15-minute drive from work, and your mind would just chew on stuff, right? And they just didn't want to be around my energy in any way, shape, or form, and I didn't even clue into that at all. Until I went to a workshop, and it was about equine-facilitated wellness and equine-facilitated learning. And it was by Sue McIntosh in Cremona, Alberta. And so that was really the beginning of my horse journey, where I learned about horses being a sentient being, having thoughts and emotions and feelings, their connectedness, how to relate to them. So that was really the beginning. And so after I'd done a few courses with Sue, I was like, I'd really love to be able to combine horses and nurses. And so there was an article in a Canadian nurse magazine that appeared one day, another aha moment. And I thought, wow, this is really great. I could combine compassion fatigue, burnout, and moral injury into workshops for nurses. So I kept pursuing my certification through PRO-EFW here in Canada to do the equine facilitated learning. And I did my first workshop in 2014. So, so that was really the beginning of my journey and experience with horses. And it also changed me because I'm so much more aware of what my energy is, and the effects of my energy on the animals, but also other people. Mind you, I still get mad. I still say the wrong things, and the good thing about the universe is they're always going to give you another opportunity to improve, right?
That's so, haven't we talked about that a lot, Alyssa?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, all this, mindfulness training and how it all blends together, and but I still screw up, and I still have those moments. I think that's just human nature.
The horses have a really interesting way of kind of bringing us back and, letting us know to stay present with them when we're working with them.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Yeah. My old trainer would say, I'd be riding and then something would go sideways and he'd say, you stop riding your horse. And I couldn't get it. But so what he really meant was that you weren't with your horse, right? It's like when you do liberty work, I do lots of liberty with Tinker, my gypsy Vanner gelding. And if you're not with him, he just leaves, right? You really have to want that connection with him or he's just gonna, you're not with me, so I'm going to go over there and eat some grass.
I've really noticed that, especially lately, because we've been doing pretty much everything we do now is at liberty with our two horses.
That's awesome.
And I'm not saying that that's the best way in every environment or whatever, but for us, it's working really well. And I've noticed, even just on a simple walk, if I go to pull out my phone and take a picture or video or something like that,
they get so mad.
They don't. I don't think they get mad. They just decide to okay, well, if you're gonna do that, then I'm gonna go eat grass.
Yeah. Typically, what Cody does, Willow, when I have my phone out, she'll come up to me and she'll throw me with her hand. You better get off the screen and pay attention to me.
Yeah.
Fine then, gosh.
Yeah. So they're very much in tune with how in tune or not we are.
Absolutely.
And have you found that working with as you stated, the burnt out nurses, do you feel like they roll up to a session or whatever that you have going on with them, and you have to kind of train that for the human to do you do some mindfulness training or
yes,
allow
I do,
them to kind of get connected with that?
I do, yeah. So the first exercise I do is called meeting over the fence. So we do a little talking about mindfulness and how important it is. And then you meet the horse over the fence and you're not allowed to touch the horse or speak to the horse. And you just observe the horse. So that's the first exercise. And then you do your frolic.
And how long does that exercise last?
It depends on the horse. It depends on what's going on. Like usually I have an indoor arena that I rent. And so I'll have like a string up, because Tinker can be very curious. And so I have a string up and he, sometimes I'll be there and everybody will be standing there quietly observing the horses and they'll be way over on the other end of the arena. And I'll be like, oh, you guys come on over here and say hi, come over here and say hi, right? And because I really want the nurses to really connect with the horses and I want the horses to connect with the nurses, right? And so I think one of the last workshops I did, Tinker was like over there and he just wasn't into the nurses. He just wasn't into them. And then eventually he came around and he went and met each one down the line and said hello, right? And then Annie came and met each one down the line. And it's really,
so cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting because then we look at like, which sense was the strongest? Like, did you want to talk to the horse? Did you want to touch the horse? Could you smell the horse? So we talk about the various senses and stuff. So it's really interesting. And what's really interesting is everybody wants the horses to like them.
Yeah, right. They just have that sort of demeanor about them. And yeah, they're good, definitely a good indicator as to how, like, for me personally, at least, like how my emotional state is. Mm-hmm. Like, if I feel them like kind of pushing me away, mm-hmm. I'm like, all right, well, I got to step back and check that. Yeah. And see like, and 99.9%, if not 100% of the time, there's something that I'm thinking about, mm-hmm. be it subconsciously or, and so I deal with that and then they're cool, mm-hmm. and then they open back up. But, is that like that for you too, Alyssa? Yeah.
I feel like they're most connected when I'm like most present with them.
Yeah.
And like sitting like,
yeah.
The top of my mind or something else that matters at the moment. And when I think about how hungry for breakfast I am, they're just like, yeah, no, I don't really want to be. Yeah.
So I've learned, like, from horses is to really check myself, like from the person who used to just stew about something that happened at work and go into the field and stuff. So I really, I have a delete button. So when I leave work now, I just press the button as I'm walking down the stairs and I just leave everything at work and none of it comes home. Right. And I check myself at the gate and, make sure that, that I'm ready to be around the horses. And sometimes, they don't want to be around me. And it's like, I used to be mm-hmm. really, the old me would have been, oh my God, like, I'm going to make you do this. And now it's like, okay, like, I get it. Some days you don't feel like hanging out with another friend either. So it's okay.
Yeah. That's one of the like epiphanies that I've had recently is like, we as humans, and I'll probably ruffle some feathers, so to speak, like making this comment. I think we as humans, like, often inject our own expectations and like what we desire to get from any particular relationship, mm-hmm. we inject that or project that onto the other party of the relationship. And so I've noticed like a lot of people, and we haven't had a lot of people over, but people who have interacted with our horses on our property, they'll come up and just like, pat the horse and like, and it's like they have absolutely no understanding or awareness as to like what they're doing. And Alyssa and I have talked about that in a way of like, a lot of times it's equivalent to us just like running up to somebody and like bear hugging them, mm-hmm. And like, I would hate if somebody did that to me. I'm not a hugger type person.
Yeah.
And so like, it's really given me like an opportunity to like become really aware as to how I just am as a human being. And I think that's what you're ultimately talking about.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Respectful to them when they say no.
Yeah, and giving them the option to say no and not just, cracking a whip, so to speak, and like, you're going to do this because I said and I'm superior to you. So, it's cool. What would you say is like your number one goal in your horsemanship journey right now?
Well, right now, I've been doing lots of liberty with Tinker. So my ultimate goal is to get him to lay down is one of them. And it's been a struggle and he's not there yet, but we are so close. We're close. And it's just getting that last little bit, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was actually like a really near and dear to my heart, sort of trick. And personally, like not so long ago, I came across another training method, and it's not just for horses. It's called the trust technique, and it's by a guy named James French out in the UK, so across the pond there. And I actually stumbled upon it on a Facebook ad and kind of fell in love with the process. And it's very, not to get off on a tangent on that, but in a very simple way to put it, it's just connecting your mindfulness with the animals. And it doesn't have to be horses. But where I'm going with that is in his videos, kind of like discussing like the techniques and whatever. He's got horses like laying their head in his lap, and he's just like petting them, and they're asleep. And so I was like, man, that'd be awesome if that, to have that connection with the horse, because we've all had that connection, I think, at some point with like a dog or a cat or something. The smaller domestic animals. But I felt myself kind of like wanting that so much, like to where I was like, all right, now it's kind of I'm trying to train a particular trick or something like that. And so what I wound up doing is just kind of backing up and letting it be. And just this past week, I had probably one of the most emotional experiences of my life.
Wow.
And I say that that's not an exaggeration. And I didn't approach, so my horse's name is Cody, and I didn't even approach him at all. I was just standing outside of his pen. And he ultimately, the way I interpreted like his energy and his communication was that he was ready to sort of let me know some of the trauma that he had been through. And that happened. And ultimately, I found myself bawling my eyes out.
Wow.
In his pen next to him. And he was standing up initially, and then I sat there on the ground, and a few seconds later he laid down.
Oh wow, that's so beautiful.
It was and then he went to sleep, and he moaned like he was like in a very deep sleep, and I fell asleep and woke up about a half hour later.
Wow. And
we both woke up, I think, at about the same time, and it was just like this eureka moment of like connection. And that was only like this past week, and the days after that, he's been connected to me like more than like a puppy, and so, and James French in the trust technique, he talks a lot about that, where the animal that you're working with in that way will go into what he calls a healing sleep. And when they wake up, they associate you with that particular feeling. And I don't know, maybe, that'll help in your goal to get them to lay down, because at the end of the day, I think it just comes as when they're comfortable.
Exactly.
Of course, we can make them lay down, but certainly doesn't sound like the role you're trying to play.
And even Willow's lay down with me, but not like after my dad came in from that session with Cody. He had tears running down his eyes.
Yeah.
What was up?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the day after that he actually had it in him to, tell me what had happened. But,
Wow.
I've never had that connection with any animal yet. And I feel like maybe one day I'll have something similar with Willow, but can't say it for sure.
You might already have it.
You
sounds
just
like you're
take it
pretty
in
connected.
strides and as it comes, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting what horses bring out in people, even for me, and especially for my workshops. So most people that come don't have any experience with horses. But most nurses are very intuitive and very in tune with healing. And there was one young girl nurse that came, and her name's Katie. And most people that come to me don't have any experience with horses at all, right? And I've got a few good stories about that, but I'm going to tell this one. So this is Katie. And so I have two horses that I use in the workshops, Annie, my quarter horse mare, and Tinker, the gypsy banner. So I do some exercises on boundaries, and they're very simple. My exercise is very simple: leading, ground tying, and drawing a line in the sand and getting the horse to stay there. Like, very simple. There's no round penning in what I do. I don't like round penning. I don't think
we don't either. We're taking ours out.
I don't think it's fair to put my horses in a round pen with someone that has never worked with a horse in that way. I just don't think it's fair for anybody, so I just don't do it. So anyway, what was really fascinating from this 28-year-old nurse that had no experience with horses was, this was her interpretation. I feel like Tinker is interviewing me to see if I'm qualified to take care of him.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And she goes, I feel like Annie is going to take care of me. Right. And so it's like no experience with horses, but yet very in tune with what those two horses are all about.
What's going on.
Yeah. With what's going on. Right. And, it's just fascinating. It's fascinating what they bring out. Right. And I don't interpret any of the experiences that my workshop participants have. What I do for the format is I give a little bit of a lecture. They have an interaction with the horse, whether it's meeting over the fence, leading, brushing, or just observing. And then they have some questions to reflect on, and then we have a group discussion. Right. So, so it's not for me to interpret their experience. Their experience is how they interpret it.
So are these sessions, are they like a day long, or do you have people come to your property and stay for a while? Or
I just do 1 day workshops for now. Yeah. One day I wouldn't mind having a couple day retreat, but that would probably be well on down the road given certain circumstances. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. So you had talked about wishing you had done like more liberty work. Now, is that something that you're continuing to work toward, or tell us more about that? Why liberty?
Well, when I first started riding lessons, I just learned how to ride. I didn't learn body language of the horse or how to read the horse. I just learned to get on and walk, trot, lope, turn left, turn right, all the maneuvers and such. So I think if I could go back and do it over again, I probably would have started with the liberty, and then you have that way of building the connection with the horse. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And, yeah, Alyssa, so your eyes lit up when you said that.
I am all for the liberty. Like, coming from, and I mean, like he said earlier, I mean, we haven't been in the horse industry for longer than, say, 4 years. And I mean, I had a very negative reinforcement, natural horsemanship-based trainer,
right,
who trained Mocha Liberty. But I mean, she never really taught me how to use it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But I had, watched YouTube videos and movies, and like this horse would follow this trainer or this rider with no tack or lay down for her to get on. And I was like, man, that looks really cool. That's a legitimate dream of mine. And I mean, I guess long story short, I got Willow, came across a course that is all through like positive reinforcement and essentially liberty training. And now here I am fulfilling a dream.
Yeah.
Training with liberty and the connection and the choice.
So that's interesting. Like, so do you feel, I mean, clearly you feel a better connection?
Oh, yes.
Working liberty versus, because I remember with Mocha, it was just kind of like, well, we had Mocha first, and then we got Cody, and I hated like the round pen. I used to tell Alyssa, like, I feel like I'm going into a gym and having to run a marathon on a treadmill, and I was like, there's got to be a better way to like approach this, and like the horses don't like it. I can feel that, and like, but I just resolved to the fact that like. Or the idea, not really a fact, it was just an idea at the time that I just didn't know. So, did that, like, liberty, switching over from that, sort of more complex, structured environment to liberty, how has that worked out for you, Alyssa?
It's worked out really cool, actually, because Willow is a previously wild Mustang, and upon getting her, I had been online researching, reading, watching videos of training a Mustang, because I had this vision that like it's a wild Mustang, and even though she was gentle, a gentle Mustang can still be dangerous, can still charge, can still kick, can still kick and bite, and all these other, And so, upon getting her, it was like I have to use all these natural horsemanship techniques because I don't know anything else. And it wasn't until actually like a week or so after Willow came home, so I had started working with her a little bit on natural horsemanship stuff, that we came across Mustang Maddie. And, there she taught, I was fortunate enough to be able to go through a course, and she was teaching, use of clicking and treating horses and choice. Yeah. And that, it spoke to me, and from day one of starting Willow with it, I saw much calmer eyes for her, and a calmer. Her head was lower more. And then she wanted to be with me. Like, I would walk in this wild Mustang's pen a month after having her, and she'd come up and be like, "Hey, how's it going? Like, you can pet me." And I've never, Mocha never did that. When I would walk in Mocha's pen, Mocha would just about turn her butt toward me. Yeah. Not to be disrespectful, if you will, but just because she didn't like being with me. Yeah. I made work hard on her. It was like, and so, now I feel like I smile more. I'm not agitated because my horse is comfortable with me, and she craves being with me. Like, I am her lead mare, which is like, that makes me feel awful.
Oh yeah, I bet it does.
But the transformations, I don't know, I love the liberty work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the way to really connect. Yeah. Yeah. One thing
I know there's a lot of people out there who, clearly have been brought up in like the more ingrained traditional ways, the breaking a horse method, even natural horsemanship in a lot of ways Alyssa and I talk about it a lot. Like, we kind of scratch our heads as to like the term natural. It just, there's a lot that doesn't feel natural. Even if we had just observed how they are in the wild, it's like, we were just talking about that today, right? Like, a lot of natural horsemanship is like only picking a very small percentage of their actual natural behavior. And then kind of tagging it with, this is natural because, right. Interesting. So, be it that this is Reinforce the Horse podcast, we, crafted a question about, what is your favorite way of reinforcing your horse? And it sounds like you have a pretty thorough understanding of what your horse is like when it comes to reinforcing them. So tell us more about that.
Well, I'm going to talk about Tinker. So I've been taking him to Jim Anderson's clinician that comes to Nova Scotia every year. And I did some of Jim Anderson's clinics in Alberta. He's very well known. And so Tinker has been going to gym clinics for like 5 years. And so this last year that I took him this past fall, Jim was saying how he could see a big change in Tinker, and he seemed like he was a bit of a different horse. And then I just said to Jim, I said, it's not him. I said, it's me. He said, I've changed. And so what I learned, so what I learned from Jim is that, so my way of reinforcing the horse is you work with them at least 3 consecutive days. So you don't just like work with them something on Monday and then Thursday afternoon and then Saturday morning. To make it fair to the horse, you have to make it consecutive, right? So I look at my work schedule, and if I can fit 3 days in a row where I can work on something like, getting him to, I'm trying to get him to shake his head no right now, is our thing. I will try and do that, right? And then, so I just have to commit to that it's going to be the 3 days in a row, because I don't want to do 2 days and lose the 3rd day, because then I have to start all over again the next set. Does that make sense? Right? Yeah, and then if I don't have 3 days in a row, I just kind of generally review things that we've done already, right? He loves peppermints. You bring out the peppermints, and he starts doing every trick he knows how to do before you even tell him. Are you talking
like candy canes or
like peppermints? They're called English peppermints here.
Okay.
Yeah. Send me your address and I'll send you a bag. They're magical. They're amazing things. They are like,
right on.
Yeah. He goes crazy for the peppermints. Right. So, so that's what I use, with him. Cool. So that's kind of how I reinforce the horse. And I look at 3 days in a row, and then and you always want to end on a positive note, right? You always need to end in a really good spot where you are. And so if I turn him out to the field and the other horses are kind of far away, I will walk him out to the other horses, because I don't want him leaving me at a full gallop.
Yeah, so you don't necessarily mean like training has to go perfect, but you mean just like the end result is that ultimately they get a nice dopamine response in their brain, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so like the biggest thing for me is the 3 days in a row, and then end on a positive note. And then, because however you leave it is where they remember it, I think. Right? So if you get really mad and you have a big argument with them, that's kind of where you left it, right? But if you have your argument and then you make up, if you make up and be friends
really
after that.
That you bring that up.
Yeah.
That's that's what my trainer has talked about, Maddie, to me.
Yeah.
So she's talked about that quite frequently.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I've been taught through her course to always end a session with some sort of treat in there, any spots. Yeah. And dish.
Yeah. And I'm much better at reading the horse too, right? So I can tell like, oh, he's getting a little bit uncomfortable. His eyes getting a little bigger. Right. And when Tinker gets stressed, he kind of stands funny. Like you just kind of know your horse, and you know, like, this isn't going the way I wanted it to do. Let's take a step back and start over, or go to where he knows. And then, I'm not perfect. So I do get frustrated and angry, and I do have to step away sometimes too, right? So it's that opportunity that the universe is always going to give you a chance to do better.
Yes, definitely. and couldn't be truer with our equine friends for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that is pretty much all that we wanted to cover. Do you have any last words of wisdom for our guests, who are our listeners, rather?
Yeah. Just keep listening. You guys have a great little thing going here. I really enjoy it. And I really liked your little one on the horse's eye. I thought that was great.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
We have a couple more of those planned out.
Yeah.
Because the article that we read on that was about the eyes and ears.
Yeah.
So we plan to kind of sprinkle those in the mix as well.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is just our discussion of topics that, hey, what do you want to talk about? Like, what's on your mind today? And so that's kind of how we're trying to, have it free flowing, but we appreciate you reaching out and listening, and
my pleasure. That was fun.
Definitely being a guest on the show. We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And,
Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.